All right, so how do I intro? Right, welcome to another episode of Jelly and Custard with myself, Walton, Aiden, and Lee. My name is Andriek, and today we're going to be discussing something that has been happening for the last 2 weeks in South Africa, and it's been called many, many names. It's been called riots, it's been called looting, it's been called support for a former president. But I think very important, we do need to discuss the root cause. In news terms, what happened 2 weeks ago is that former President Jacob Zuma, after many, many months, actually years, of legal battles and troubles, there's been a whole commission that has been set up for state capture. The commission itself asked for him to appear before it. He refused several times. That was taken to the Court, the Constitutional Court, the highest court in the country. And the Constitutional Court said that he was in contempt of court, which means that he has to go to prison for a set amount of time. There was a week where Jacob Zuma himself said, no, I'm not going. People around him said, there's no need for you to go. And then last week, he handed himself over to the police and he went to Escort Correctional Facility, where he has been since. What has happened since then is that the country has pretty much exploded. And the important thing for us to discuss today is not just the cause of this event, but what's happening around it. Obviously, we are not legal experts, so I don't think that we can talk very much about the the build-up legally to this. But I think we can take from our own experiences what's happened and what we've seen in the past in South Africa with things like this happening in the country. There we go. Welcome to Jelly and Custard.
That's a heavy welcome, but I mean, also just in addition to saying that we're not legal experts, we are also. I very rarely try and like throw this out there, but I think we are also experts in other ways, or not experts, but we are learned and researched in other ways. So, among us,
Of course,
there's educators, there's news people for public radio stations and public media. There's also academics. And so I don't want to like throw that as a qualification, but I do want to say that although we're not legal experts, we are
qualified in other areas.
We are qualified in other areas. I do think, apart from us speaking about the one, the extent of the reasons why things ruptured in the way they ruptured right now, whether it's Jacob Zuma or food insecurity, poverty, joblessness. We spoke about youth unemployment in a previous episode. What I do also, want to center in this conversation that we're about to have is the kind of language that is being used in relation to people, Black and poor people, who are engaging in a politics of theft, a politics of so-called looting, a politics of riot, and so on, vandalism. These are all words that are being thrown around. I'm adding politics to it because I do think it's a political, it's an act of political will on the part of Black and poor people. And also, I want to say from the outset that I don't think all violence is bad. I do not think violence directed at people or entities who are trying to kill you at every turn is a bad thing. I do think that violence directed towards immigrants, towards refugees, towards poor Black people and Black people trying to make a way in life is abhorrent, and we really need to like take a firm stance against that kind of thing as a society. So that's my I want to get my emotional spiel out the way at the beginning so that I can engage in analysis going forward for the rest of the episode. But yeah, I really just wanted to say that like upfront, and not to step on anybody's toes in this group, because we all have different politics. People need to understand that we all have we have similar politics, but different ways of engaging it sometimes, and different languages that we use to engage it sometimes. Where so I'm also just setting the grounds for where I'm coming from for the rest of for the guys, for Andrik, for Aiden, for Lee. Sorry, that was a spiel. My bad.
So before we continue, can I ask, because we have had this conversation, we've had arguments about it. What situations would violence? Well, let's not reduce it to something that's not nuanced. But in what situation would violence be? In what situation would violence be a, let's say, quote unquote, proper means of political action?
Okay, well, I think one instantiation of violence that we have seen in resistance politics over the years is either anti-police or anti-military. So it really depends on like how the state deploys its own entities against its citizenship. During apartheid, we have seen the SAPS really militarized against the black populace, and so for a black person to act against that would automatically be considered an act of violence, regardless of what they are doing. The language is immediately, this is an act of violence against police, and therefore an act of violence against the state, and therefore this black person, our actions against this black person is justified. I think in the face of that kind of state repression, uh, acts of militancy, acts of throwing bricks against police cars, which is a tactic that we've seen all of our lives during our life, during our 3 decades of life in South Africa. In our parents' life, the half a brick is a classic weapon of the resistance in South Africa. You know what I mean? Like even more so than anything else, than a petrol bomb or anything like that. And so I just think that the register within which resistance violence occurs is not the same as the register in which state violence occurs, where state violence comes with Caspers, with military grade vehicles, with bullets, with grenades, with stun grenades, and tear gas, and all of these things. And I think there has to be a different kind of tactical so-called violence coming from people who are living through resistance politics. I think the States is a prime example of people's resistance to state violence, where black folks are putting up barricades, or putting up like burning barricades in the streets as ways to protect themselves from the police. We have the autonomous zones in Seattle and all of these things that have to be protected from the state. So I don't know, I can go on about this for hours, but I just think that the ethical position for anyone who is in favor of any kind of liberation politics has to be a position of understanding why black people are picking up bricks or fire or tires. You don't have to condone it every single time. I'm not saying you have to condone it every single time, but just try to understand what is going into the logic and the political philosophy of a group of people engaging in that kind of action.
I've got you. I understand. So I think the interesting thing for I know we're going to be speaking about everything that has happened in the last few weeks, but also the kind of public physical outcry or outrage in groups of people that we've seen in South Africa for the last few decades. We've seen protests that have turned violent from the early 2000s onwards already, and even before that, as soon as democracy came to South Africa. But for me, the interesting thing that I've seen now, especially with these last 2 weeks, is how this violence, or rather not this violence, but rather this coordinated effort of people across the country was done by players within the ruling party, players that are, or rather people influencing from behind the curtain, from behind a WhatsApp group, apparently, um, from the ruling party in a country run by the ruling party. That for me, that's been the most interesting thing so far that's come out in the news so far, that there's 12 people and the majority of those people are in the ruling party, former intelligence officers, former intelligence community people that spurred people on to go out. And obviously what we've seen is, when desperate people see an opportunity, desperate people will do what needs to be done during that desperate time. um, and that's the situation that we're in now, and all of the fallout that's happened is just ripping open these things that we've known are there, because we've been politically aware for how long now, but we've known it's there. But the dream of the rainbow nation seems to be just a little bit like threadbare at this point.
I don't want to put Aiden on the spot, but I also do want to put him on the spot because I think this is an instance where, like, Aiden's, understanding of the relationship between party and state it would be really important to me, and I think to other folks who would be listening. I don't know if you want to say something, Aiden, if I'm really putting on the spot there, but I really think like this is an instance of like person before the party, and why that matters so much in the post-apartheid ANC. Yeah, and hey Danny, and post-apartheid politics, and so I don't know if you want to dive in, but I would really love to hear your.
I mean, I'm just struck by two things about this entire situation. Firstly, that if the narrative around the violence that we've seen the past few days, the past 2 weeks, is solely placed in the responsibility of former President Jacob Zuma, then it is ironic because his term was one of the most securitized terms in post-apartheid South Africa. Like, if there was anything that marked his presidency, it was overspending on security. We recall like the State of the Nation addresses, we recall those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So it was kind of ironic that someone could, but also we know that Jacob Zuma comes out of a particular Nkonto Wesizwe history. He comes out of a military intelligence history. Like, there is that kind of thing. And I also just want to say, we've spoken about it before, and maybe not on the podcast itself, but we've spoken about before about the nature of violence and the kind of ways in which the state's language is always violence in one form or another. And what we are dealing with here to some degree is a response to that violence, in appropriate form. I think that, I mean, I feel very out of place, I must be completely honest, and like, I guess this is a confession to some degree. I feel out of place talking about these things for two reasons. Firstly, because of class position. I am, for better or worse, someone who has something to lose in some sense. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm in a position where I can't, my middle class position shields me in a way from the particular kinds of violence that other people in this country experience from the state and from other forms of hierarchical power, so to speak. And the second thing is that myself and Andrik are both sitting in Cape Town, which once again talks to, I think, what you're getting at, Walton, which is this relationship between party and state. We're sitting in a province that is notoriously governed by the opposition party in this country, and is also underpinned by a certain politics around A, migrancy, B, xenophobia, internal xenophobia, and thirdly, underpinned by a certain kind of economic language around self-sufficiency, around um, entrepreneurial kind of ways of seeing the self, which we see now on display. I mean, we went from a presidency driven by a certain kind of populism, right? And populism broadly defined here, like Zuma's presidency was one, brought into effect um, through a certain kind of, like he was about the people, broadly put. And Uncle Cyril, and I don't think that the familial is the right way to go about it, but I'll just go say Uncle Cyril with his family meetings is about the self. I mean, he's got a foundation called the Cyril Ramaphosa Foundation, where there's the word there is building an inclusive society through like empowerment. That empowerment is through encouraging people to build businesses. It's an entrepreneurship of the self, right? And we saw these past 2 weeks the rescinding of, or the taking back of, the social grants, of the relief grants that was to a large degree keeping households afloat in this country.
Yeah.
And so when like this, I mean, this thing was a ticking time bomb. People who are saying like, yeah, this is like sudden. There's always this language around unrest as if it's sudden. It's a flare up.
Yeah.
The language in the media is also, yeah, we know we need to contain the unrest, we need to contain the violence, we've got sporadic attacks, da da da. When really, like, it's been a long time coming. The question now is how do you build solidarity? How do you build from this? You know what I'm saying? Right now, the narrative is one of cleanup. Like, we must also ask, what does the cleanup mean? Are
Right.
we cleaning up the streets, or are we cleaning up the streets?
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? Are we
No.
doing the work
Yeah.
of rebuilding our communities, or are we doing the work of rebuilding the same infrastructure
Yeah.
that maintained the violence of the state that we... Do you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I don't know if that's useful to you, but
Yeah.
that's where I was thinking. There was something else that I wanted to say, that I was reading this book called Inventing the Future, and it's about how basically we have everything at our disposal to become a leisure society. But really, what the book was talking about, me, I'm always obsessed about how to find ways to not to work. Um, but one of the arguments the book was making was that the left and the kind of modes that the left uses to make it stand against certain kinds of state violence is stuck in a moment of the, like, say, the early 20th century or whatever. And the state knows those modes already. So you think of the mode of protest. What does the state knows the modes of protest?
Yeah.
People come, they do a protest. The state comes, they put up the police forces there. The police stands, watches. You get your permit for protest. It's like performative, and then there's nothing.
Yeah.
Um, and what we saw today was the disruption of that kind of dynamic. This past few weeks, we saw a way in which there was a different kind of politics that emerged. So yeah, I'll just leave it there for now, but that's where my head's at.
Just I know Lee's gonna jump in now, but just before Lee goes, I just want to say that Dr. Natasha Valley at UCT, she is doing a lot of work around like basic income grants, social grants work, and like one of the things that Aiden brought up is one of the issues around the the centrality and importance of grants to a lot of South Africans, and even those grants aren't worth much, like financially, like fiscally, budget wise speaking, it's not much money, but it's really important to a lot of people. And so I just wanted to like punt Dr. Valley's work, just because I think what she's doing is a combination of like theory and praxis in a way that I think is useful. Uh, I don't know. I know Lee's in there.
Yeah, just to touch on what
you've said about violence and Aiden's notes on the state and how people of violent environments, what tools do they have? So I've been thinking also, like, each sector, let's call it, because it's a classes situation now. Like, we've moved beyond, I won't say totally beyond, but what we are clearly seeing now is a classist um, um, preservation, you know? And each of these classes have the different tools in order to serve their own agenda. People have lawyers, they have companies, they have social currency, they have all these different legal and financial assets and avenues that they can go to when there is a problem in their communities, or if they want their voices heard. Now you look at people who have been living a certain way, a violent way, living under violence and oppression for so many decades. What tools do they have but disruption and violence? When Aiden speaks about the protest, yes, you get your permit, you go march, and it's the same old thing. And then what? All right. The voices are heard. When has any good dramatic change happened with peaceful protest? Now, we cannot judge, like as Aiden said, we are sitting on a we are sitting in Cape Town. Half of us are sitting in Cape Town, another half we are privileged, right? So there's a lived experience that one cannot judge what people have been through. And if you have, like, people aren't scared to loot, they aren't scared to acts of violence, because what's going to happen? What you're going to take away? Nothing. I don't have anything. So until we are in that position, we cannot say this is the right way to go about it, because they have been disregarded by state, by parties, but also by their own citizens in the country. And this is what I'm getting to. And what's been irritating me also, not irritating me.
No, say it.
One thing that's been highlighted is the quick community action to clean up their areas.
Right.
And that, I mean, I would like to have my community safe and cleaned up, but we need to move past that now. We cannot now talk Ubuntu, talk about community, talk about this, if we only care about our own communities. We can rally around and clean up our own backyards very quickly, but there's no neighborliness. There's no looking at the other communities. And then the situation starts again, because these people of living under oppression have been disregarded by the governments, the ward councillors, their municipalities, but also their fellow citizens, the ones who point and say those people.
But not only the ones who point, the ones who pick up arms and form like these ad hoc militia and go out and like chase black people away from certain areas or shopping centers or whatever. Sorry, Lee, I'm sorry, but I'm also fucking irritated, honestly.
Because who declares this area, this is our area? Right. Who governs that? Who polices that?
That's the problem with land ownership, bro.
Now there we go.
Property, land ownership, all of that. That's a property.
Does the neighborhood watch come together and say, okay, this is where we stop? How does that decision happen? Because these communities and like some communities and some areas are more affluent because they've inherited infrastructure. Therefore, shopping malls and shopping centers and certain shops draw people from outside in. But they need to understand that contributes to the economic growth of that direct area. So now you want to bite the hands, or you want to chase away the people who've been helping to support that area all this time, and now you want to draw a line in the sand and say, this is our area, go find your own stuff like that. What I'm trying to draw to is that, how do we judge these people by saying you shouldn't, like, going back to what Walton said about our differences in politics regarding to violence, I will never also call for violence. I will never say this needs to happen,
But I'm not also going to sit back and judge and say that's wrong, because I'm not in that situation. And in this case, what do the people have but disruption and violence? Because that's the only way you get attention. Because they've been
I think.
done in by the
Oh,
politics
sorry.
of the state and by us as the fellow citizens that have the social currency and have the social power to do something, not for ourselves, but for their living conditions. No one has marched, no one has taken to the streets in the well-off areas for other people's living conditions. We sat by idly and accepted those living conditions for decades, saying it's not our problem. And now we wonder why are these people like this? Why are they running around like that? We sat by and we drove past the squatter camps and we drove past all the day laborers and saw schools without toilets, but we didn't go to our ward councillors and we didn't go to our politics and say these people need help. So it's on all of us, basically, you know.
And I also wanted something else about violence. I wanted to say that we must also be aware that there's violence there's violence that's happening, that's also couched in particular political factionalism that's happening, and there are people who live in those communities who live with the violence of the state every day, who are also being subjected to the violence of this factional fights that are going on. So I know I know people whose homes have burnt down, you know what I'm saying, who have been involved in trying to build community and so on and so forth. So this violence affects all.
Can you maybe plug them, because
level.
I know they're busy fundraising. I know which
Yeah,
organization you're talking about, so maybe you can just plug this organization.
Yeah, we'll drop some notes down in the show notes, but definitely Abahlali Basum Jondolo is one of those organizations that was severely hit by this kind of violence in the past few days.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that at some point we can talk about the municipal crisis in this country, because I think that's an important part of this conversation.
I think that's what we're working up to, though, honestly, because this morning I was reading the WhatsApp group of a local local MPs in the KZN area, and it didn't say which wards. No, it did say which wards, and I'll try and find the article and again link it below. But it's a Times Live article. It's talking about all the kind of inciting that's going on, and I think this is again something that I want to come back to over and over. Is the overwhelming draconian nature of party politics in South Africa, and especially because the ANC is the ruling party at the moment, the power that they have to influence action that will derail any revolutionary action by any other black person in the country.
Yep.
So really what this comes down to is the fact that the ANC is a middle class capitalist organization as it exists now. It claims to be many things, but it is only serving the interests of capital, but also the interests of the state and its relation to capital. Therefore, it is always going to be at war with people who are working class, poor, unemployed people, and the vast majority of those people in South Africa are black people. And so all of this factionalism that is happening right now, this Jacob Zuma versus Cyril Ramaphosa nonsense, but also Jacob's Zulu versus Xhosa and stuff that is emerging, and now also Zulu. There are lines that have been drawn a long time ago, through practices of colonialism and apartheid, but also lines that have been drawn in the post-apartheid, and we have to be very real about that fact. I know we would not be in the situation in this way. We might be in a different situation, but we would not be in this situation in this way if it were not for the existence of apartheid. But apartheid existed, and therefore we have to deal with the consequences of that. The ANC government is not willing to deal with that. They are willing only to deal with party politics and how power plays between individuals will play out. And this WhatsApp conversation, or these WhatsApp conversations, were really revealing to me, in that kind of municipal power plays that were going on, in the ways in which, you have like ward councillors sending messages that people must loot specific areas, close down specific roads, because
Wow.
it's gonna like shake up the most chaos, and therefore the masses are also gonna be shaken up. So they using that to fight their factional battles instead of the real battle, which is the battle against white supremacy and capitalism in the country. And I'm not saying that white supremacy and capitalism are the only problems in the country. Like, don't get me wrong, but I feel like at the root cause of so much of what we have to deal with right now is those issues. And yeah, I mean, I don't know.
A lot of the
You
big
guys carry on. I'm talking way too fucking much today. I'm so
never
pissed off, man,
check
bro.
out.
I'm in the States. I'm watching all this cack happening at home. All I want to do is go home. It's the most
I
like
know,
hard,
bruh.
gut wrenching thing to like.
I know what
to-
you
it's a you know, Lee. It's the most fucking difficult thing to be in
to
this
segue
position right
into
now.
what you were saying, Walton. A lot of these big businesses, CEOs of Massmart, of Massmart was one of them, or like um, condemning the violence and calling for unity. And a lot of people on Twitter have started calling them out. Like, they are so tight in with government. It's like, why didn't you guys say anything? Why on now? That's what I'm talking about. The people who have the political and social clout, who are in bed with the government, they also have a responsibility to say, look here, can you stop mess? Because who's affected now? But their insurance will cover all the stuff. But what I'm saying is that the ANC is a middle class capitalist organization serving its own interests, but they're not acting alone. The private sector enables a lot of these things. And we don't have lobbying in South Africa, doesn't mean that it's not happening. I promise you now. We don't have official lobbying like they do in the States, but there are ways in which it happens. And it's one hand washes the other. It's you look after my back, I'll look after yours, and whatever must happen, must happen. And until the people start mobilizing and speaking up, not only for themselves and their own safe, trimmed, hedged communities, then it's just going to perpetuate, because the first thing that's going to happen is that those areas are going to be refurbished and looked after very quickly, so to quell those flames. And the poorest of the poor, the people who looted, the people who experienced violence through the looting, organizations and mutual aid groups in these locations that have been affected dramatically, are just back to zero, and they will be seen to lost. It's a big issue.
And I think this. I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but like I was talking about a politics of empathy the other day when we recorded the last time, and I was really serious about that, because like, if we're gonna have sustainable liberation movements and sustainable movements for liberation for everybody, like Black liberation does not mean Black people are free and therefore everybody else is subjugated in the world. Black liberation means that we all like operating.
Why do we always have to say that? Why do we always have to say?
I don't know, but people lose their fucking minds, bro. Like, Andriek, people lose their minds.
Why does it need to be said?
But I just want to I just want to just like one last thing, and then I promise I'm gonna leave you guys alone to carry on, and then I'll carry on later.
Just started.
But like
one last thing.
No, one last thing for me. You guys must carry on. But like, I get really upset when I see the state through police and through the military protecting private interest, first of all. So like the state protecting Pick and Pay, ShopRite, Woolworths, all of these. Again, they can pretend that it's a matter of protecting like state assets or whatever, but it's not about that. It's about protecting corporate interests. The other together with that is the fact that I saw photos of police like shooting rubber bullets at people, so-called looting bread. Why the fuck are you shooting at people who are taking food, Mayberu? Whether those people go sell that bread for 12 Rand, 15 Rand, whatever they decide to sell it for, or whether they eat that bread does not matter. It does not. It does
Do you
not.
do you want to do you want to hear what's do you want to hear what's worse than that?
Sasko Sam, Albany, all those motherfuckers have insurance up to the high heavens, bruh.
Do you want to hear what's worse than that, Walton?
I'm so tired, bruh.
Yeah,
Sorry.
come on,
anyway.
let me tell you quickly. Police are busy reclaiming looted goods.
Not police, military.
Military.
I'm so
They are
sick.
going to people's homes. They are taking groceries that were taken
What the fuck?
and taking them back.
where?
That is.
I'm sorry for my language today, but what the fuck?
Nah,
Mayberu?
yeah, no. I think we should.
Saw
I
that.
think at some point, like we are already touching on it, but I think what is important for us is also to start looking at what the role of the police in South Africa actually is.
We
We like
yeah.
to think that because we are a country where the majority of our country is black folk, where we have been liberated from the shackles of apartheid and all of that. I'm saying this in quotation marks. Let me just say that quickly. We've been liberated from all these things, that the police are for the people. But I mean, we have seen over and over and over and over again that arm of the state is still there for white supremacy, is still there for capital. It's still
Right.
there. It does not consider black folk in this country people. It considers black folk in this country as labor. And that's it. Get in line. That is it. And I think in this situation that we've seen in this last week, I mean, I read the news, and these are the stories that I hear, is that looted goods are now being reclaimed by the police. I mean, these are people that were hungry. These are people that for all intents and purposes, I see absolutely fuck all wrong with somebody seeing an opportunity to get something that they don't have and taking it.
Not that they don't have, that they cannot get.
That they
Never.
cannot
That
get.
they can
Thank
never
you, Lee.
have access
Like,
to.
yeah,
Never.
Because I see
Sorry,
something
yeah,
that I
fuck.
see something that I want, but I'm not gonna go take it. But I know I'm in a better off position if I work a bit harder. Excuse the term, but like, I mean, I can get it if I really. But these aren't wants, guys. These are not wants.
Bread,
These are
bruh.
absolute
bread,
needs.
now,
bread,
this is the difference.
rice, fucking beans in a can. What the fuck
Yeah.
are you talking about? Shooting people who are taking stuff like that? Like, how are you? What is in that reclamation
The
of
math
those
does
grocery
not make sense.
items? What is
Yeah.
what is in that reclamation of those grocery
And also, like,
items?
where are they taking it to?
The anti-poor sentiment in our country is fucked, guys. And Aiden said something very important earlier, and something that I want to tie like together with another situation. The one was Aiden was talking about like organizing solidarity, and how are we gonna go about organizing solidarity right now? And I think like us having this podcast conversation, hopefully like someone hears me shouting over the mic, and I'm really sorry, I'm not trying to like lower my tone, but like
No, speak on that. It's good volume.
like I think like organizing solidarity is so vital in South Africa, and I keep going back to this, but like people need to take Stephen Biko's intervention seriously, that blackness is a state of mind, not because anybody can be black, but because the apartheid government and colonialism before it succeeded in separating all black, indigenous, and otherwise subjugated people from each other. And like we really need to work on that kind of solidarity, sort that out so that we can move towards a kind of protest for liberation that does not catch the fatigue that the state always relies on. The state knows if they hold out long
Yeah.
enough, if they
Yes.
hold out just long enough,
At siege, basically.
we are gonna get tired because we
Yeah.
don't have the
Yeah.
the technology, the weaponry, the all of these, the feed, the all of these things that they do.
Yeah.
And so they are very aware of the fact that they are gonna wear out very valid protest action. Now, I'm not saying that all the protest action that was happening in the last 2 weeks is valid. I think all the
Yeah.
pro
There's some
Jacobs,
opportunists.
I think
yeah.
like the pro Jacob Zuma camp and all of those things, the factional battles, I think those are trash, and I think those are really derailing efforts to liberate Black South Africans from poverty and from the excess of apartheid and colonialism that has been left behind.